Powered by Go-Goat Sports in partnership with TSN. This is episode 33 of season 4 of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. And it is presented, as always, by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey. We've got Chris Abbott coming off a pretty big weekend of watching wildcard football, putting some money down, making some money, probably losing some money. We'll get into the Dallas-Tampa Bay game, but and this is a hockey podcast, so we don't invest a ton of time in the other sports. But obviously, when we have Chris Abbott from Botano on, Ray, we have to talk about the big games of the weekend, and there were a few. I'm not a super huge NFL guy, but I'm a fan, right? And I enjoy the routine of the weekend, especially on Sunday. You kick back and watch the afternoon game, then that drags you into the evening game, and then you're looking forward to the Monday nighter, which was Dallas and Tampa Bay. It, for me, and I don't know how you feel about this, isn't it what makes sport great? Like the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, how fired up everybody is. Even guys like you who are there on the sidelines working it. But it applies to football this time of year. It applies to baseball during the run to the World Series, and on it goes.
That's what makes playoff sports. Playoff sports are awesome. I mean, the immediacy and the urgency of the out games. Football, of course, has the one and out, but when you see a series rolling along and you're like, oh boy, this is the one here. This is the one game that matters the most. And I just love it. I mean, this weekend, you can just see the way the games went. You can see why the NFL is a colossus. Like it is the first 3 games of the weekend were ridiculous.
Well, the Jacksonville game was just flat out bonkers.
But
crazy.
And the comebacks and the change of leads and the Jacksonville game, though, I mean, that thing was 2 completely different games, and hard to not be enthused by it. That's for sure. It was awesome. Good watching.
We don't see, just to we'll get to headlines here momentarily, but that's something we see comebacks all the time in hockey. So I'm not going to try and pit the NFL versus the NHL per se, but how could you equate? So Trevor Lawrence throws 4 interceptions in the first half. Like they're down at 1 point, 27-0. Right. And then they charge back to win that. Like what? I mean, would it be 5?
I've got one, Dregs. I've got one for you.
Let's hear
I've got
it.
a comparison.
I like it.
If it were today, because media is much bigger and much more expansive. Yeah. When the LA Kings are down 5-0 to the Edmonton Oilers, and they have the miracle on Manchester and score 5 goals in the third period, Darrell Evans scores the winner and does that wild celebration down the ice. Yeah, that's one of them. Like, you can't do that, except it did, right? Like, you can't score 5 goals against the Oilers at that time. And, it wasn't like nobody was in net. Grant Fuhrer was in net, and it was, it was amazing. So that's the type of, and I think, no, it wasn't. It was game 4 because they had to go back for game 5. But, the difference is, of course, is if Lawrence and the Jags don't, put their stuff together, they're done for the year. And man, he's good. He is good. Here's the best. No, not the best part. I enjoy this about sport is that the people that are hitting him over the head with a garbage can lid last year and the year before and say the guy sucks, it's a terrible first overall pick, yada, 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 yada. And, now all of a sudden the guy's a superstar.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, where'd you go now? Yeah. It's okay to say, hey, I was wrong there, but it doesn't happen.
You have to be mentally fearless to excel in that position, especially. I mean, you can say that about a lot of different positions in sport, but just feels like if he hasn't turned the corner, and a game like that can certainly help you turn that corner, that I'm with you, man. I mean, as good as he is in the moment, he's lights out good. But it makes me
the other guy this weekend, right? The other guy this weekend is, and we can equate it all to all kinds of hockey players, is Matt Jones, the Giants quarterback. A year and a half ago, people were like, what a wasted pick. I don't think this guy can be a starter quarterback. I don't think he can be a star. And, oh my gosh, he was unbelievable on the weekend. So I don't know. It's part of what makes sports great, I think.
All right, headlines once again this season presented by our friends at Boston Pizza. And obviously, Ray, we have to start with what's gone on and going on in Vancouver. Jimmy Rutherford, president of the organization, has media availability on Monday. We're taping this Tuesday morning. Part of it was designed to address the medical concerns, the allegations around the Tanner Pearson surgeries, more than one, more than two, that he's had to correct the issues with his hand. But everyone in the organization, the media, the fan base knew, including Rutherford, that this media veil was going to turn into something much more significant than that, right? You're past the midpoint of the season. Normally, it's your general manager who sits in there, as part of the midseason and looks back and then looks ahead. In this case, because of all of the angles and stories, Rutherford felt his responsibility to do this. I thought he was very candid. I thought he was very open and very honest. We can kind of peel this thing away, but he said a couple of things first, Ray. Not one, when he arrived, he thought it was minor surgery required. Like they were going to do some things. They were going to have to fix their salary cap pressures and stuff like that. But now he looks back and says, no, major surgery is required in what is a retool, not a rebuild, but a retool. What does that mean to you when you hear those phrases and how he has put all of this together as he looks forward to multiple changes, not just a change, but multiple changes in many different areas?
95% of the time, I think it's semantics, and I think it doesn't matter, and I really don't care what word a manager or a president uses: retool, rebuild, refurbish, repolish the crap, like whatever it is, right? Like who cares? It's a word, it's a term, and of course everything gets dissected and broken down. The reason I say 95% of the time is because sometimes there are really good teams, and what they do need is a little bit of a refurbish or a retool. They need not much. You watch the Canucks coming into the year, most people felt their defense wasn't going to be good enough. And through 45 games, they've proven that to be correct. So people say, well, just blow it up and rebuild.
No.
Great idea. Hell of an idea. However, if you can't get other teams to take the contracts you'd like to move, then how do you do it? You can't push people into the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. You have contracts to honor. They have no trades, and or other teams aren't interested or don't have room, more consequently, to take on those contracts. So you're stuck. And Rutherford got into that, where he said, we can't move contracts. And if we can't move them by the deadline, we're going to have to look at buying some people out over the summer. Now, I would look specifically at the Minnesota Wild. They felt they needed to gut the inside of the locker room because they needed to turn the room over to two or four or six young guys, to have a new leadership core, but they couldn't do that with Ryan Suter and Zach Parise still there. So they bought them out. Yeah. $11 million on the cap this year, $14 million on the cap next year. Like, the only way that can happen is if you have younger players on entry-level deals that can come up and play for you. They went out and they got Sam Steele, who was a first-round pick by Anaheim. Yeah, washed out there. It didn't work. Comes in now. He's playing with, a lot of the time, he's playing with Zuccarello and Kaprizov. Oh, how's that? How about Matt Boldy?
Well.
Matt Boldy, they just signed him to a 7-year, $49 million extension on his entry-level contract. That's how you can balance the two out. So refurbish, retool, rebuild. To me, it's the way the Canucks look today is not the way they can look in October. It just can't.
Right. And clearly.
And however you get there, Dregs, it's not irrelevant. People are interested in it. But if it can be through trade, it'll be through trade. And if it can't, it'll be with something else.
Yeah. And that's the business of hockey now, right? With a salary cap, and that's going to change in the years to come, but it's not going to change quick enough. So management is going to have to drill down. And as Rutherford said, they're committed to doing that. So I want to take you back to post shootout win, Vancouver over Carolina, and Bo Horvat, captain of the Vancouver Canucks, I thought did an exceptional job of of fielding the questions at that point, acknowledging guys in the room hear the noise, they hear it. How can you not hear it? And he acknowledged that, the coach, Bruce Boudreau, clearly hears it. Now, Rutherford talked about this as part of his avail. I don't recall a president at this point of a season openly talking about having conversations with potential coaching candidates while they still have a full-time NHL coach on the bench in Bruce Boudreau. So that was a bit strange to me. And look, everybody's speculating on Rick Tocchet and what's his situation with TNT. Can he get out in under 4 weeks? All of that. Well, that'll play itself out. But I want to go back to the post-game comment from Horvat after the Carolina game, where he says, quote, "We continue to battle for him," being Boudreau. "He's a really good person and a good coach. Everybody wants to play for him, so we're going to continue to do that." Now, if he were a veteran player, Ray, I would listen, and I would think it's the honorable and the right thing to do. But he's a captain of the Vancouver Canucks. He's not saying that to pay lip service so that the pestering media goes away, right? Bo Horvat is saying it because he feels that way. He believes that, whether others in the room do or don't. He speaks on behalf of the players. So do we learn anything from that? Or is this just a veteran player sticking up for a guy who's been kicked in the shins about 100 different ways?
I think it's that. Here, I'll tell you this from being in a locker room. I was in them for 18 years professionally and umpteen years prior to that. Never once, not once, was there ever a discussion of, hey, should we keep playing hard for this guy? Never once. Not once.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, it's a team, but it is really an individual business. All pro sports are, because you're trying to survive. And so if you can feel badly about how everything plays out, you better look after your business, or if they decide to make a coaching change, you're going to be on the next train too. Like that, that's just how it works. So Dregs, I saw Bo Horvat in Florida. I was down at the scouting meetings and ran across a bunch of the Canucks. I saw him and Brock Besser, and they're walking around. I was there with Cammy. I got nothing to do. I'm just kind of walking around and I run into these guys, and they all, you can just see in their body, they wear it. Like it's not just in the 3 hours of the rink. They wear it, man. Like this is a hard year for them, and all they can do is the best they can for themselves and thereby for the team. Like if you're Bo Horvat, you can't score more goals so Oliver Ekman-Larsson defends better.
Right.
Like Oliver Ekman-Larsson has to get his game in order. That's why I say it's like independent contractors playing together. So what Horvat has to stand up there as the captain and take a few body blows, and it's not easy. And he's done a terrific job. The toughest part of this, as I watch it, is like there is a conclusion to this, and everybody can see where it's going. And it would be nice if it happened, and that's likely going to be a coaching change. But if it would happen sooner rather than later, right. And you just kind of outlined some of the factors. If it is Rick Tocchet, the contract with TNT apparently has got some weeks that he has to give notice, so TNT doesn't go to broadcast and the chair's open. So they've got to work their way around that too. So it's a complicated deal. At the start of the year, we heard a lot about the Canucks don't want to pay 3 coaches, right? Like that was at the very start of the year.
Yeah.
And don't forget, back in June, there was an out here for both sides.
Yeah.
Or rather for Boudreau first, I believe, right? The Canucks would have still had to pay Bruce if they were going to fire him, but Bruce could have left and gone to another team. But clearly there wasn't another team that was available, because who's going to come back under these circumstances unless you really have to?
Yeah.
And he's doing the best he can. The team is pretty much what the team was thought of to be. And now you got to get back to trying to make it work, because I would say all the deals you wanted to make in the summer of last year are still the deals you want to make now. However, looking around the league, can you even think of a trade? Like I in the moment here, I can't.
No. And
like, since the start of the year, I can't think of any.
Yeah, the Canucks made a couple early. right? Like super early.
Well, Travis Dermott was last year.
No.
They made Jason
Boston.
Dickinson for Stillman.
Yeah.
But
and
I mean, like,
Stagnica, it's there's not much happening. There's next to nothing happening on the trade front, which, as you know, is in part because of the parity. Not everybody, but most around the NHL head office celebrate as being a great thing. But if you're a team that's looking for change, it's not such a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, how much, if you've got 3 nickels to spend, it's pretty tough when everybody's offering you a player with 4 nickels. You can't make it fit, man.
All right, we'll move away from Vancouver, but quick thought on just the presence of Gino Odjick, right? Just such a. I don't know if it's fair. We overuse the term when we think of the position and the role that Gino played in the National Hockey League. Beloved Vancouver Canuck is stating the obvious here. Gentle Giant, I don't know. Maybe part of the time it fits with him, but just such a presence in the community, right? Like his passing has hit a lot of people, understandably and appreciably. So, why don't you provide a thought on Gino and what he was like in the community around Vancouver, the NHL community, and in his day, man, he was fierce. He was fierce.
He was fierce, and he could play.
Yeah.
Like he could play. Like when, that was a time when there were guys on the ice that were, they really weren't very good players, but they were tough. Gino could play, and nobody really on the toughness scale was wandering by Gino going, "No, I don't worry about him." Like he was fearsome. I will say this from a guy that's small. I never really worried about anything dirty in the game with Gino. Like I never did. You always had an eye on those guys in case they felt it was time for them to make a statement and you happened to be in the wrong place. Right. And they would just run right over top of you. Like somebody like Gino could go over me like a speed bump. You wouldn't even notice, right? But that was not the way he played. If you got within 6 feet of Pavel Bure, look out, because here comes Gino. But that's Gino on the ice. I don't know if you've seen the footage of his penalty shot goal against Mike Vernon.
I did, yeah.
And if people that are listening, go to YouTube and dial it up. And of course, the feed is grainy and all that stuff. But when he is getting ready to shoot and then scores, the building explodes. And the celebration from there's guys standing on the bench watching, like not on the ground. They're on the bench. And it's just like, it's the most beautiful thing to watch. Yeah. In the community, Gino, you see as his passing became more public, people talking about an interaction they had with him. And it is remarkable and it is widespread. One guy tweeted out, he remembers back to being a 10-year-old kid and they'd play basketball at this community center. And every so often, Gino would show up and just play with these kids. Just play basketball with them. Later on, he was at the Musqueam Golf Course here in Vancouver. Gino would just go out and be the marshal for the day. Could you imagine you're playing slow and Gino rolls up in a golf cart? It tells you to get moving. But it's time and again, and he was proud of his heritage, proud of him, proud of his team. I read this. I didn't know this, that the reason he wore number 29. Did you know that?
No.
That it was his father's number at the residential school.
I did not know that.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known it.
Oh.
But he is a legendary figure in the Vancouver Canucks history.
Yeah.
And, you hear a lot of, he won't be forgotten. No chance. Gino touched way too many people in way too many a positive way. And at 52, it is really, really sad.
Difficult loss. Obviously, our condolences to Gino's family. He will be missed. No doubt about that. Let's shift gears here, Ray. Tough transition as we look at some of the Alberta teams here, Edmonton and Calgary. But Evander Kane appears ready to return. He's not going to remedy all the issues that seemingly plague Edmonton to a point, the inconsistency, their defensive woes, all of that. But what sort of bump do you think Kane will give the Oil?
Oh, if I couple this with the season that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is having, this gives the Oilers all kinds of options about how to align their forwards. Play McDavid and Draisaitl together, play them apart, and if you play them apart, now you've got this three-headed monster up the middle of the ice with McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent-Hopkins. If Nugent-Hopkins is your two center, that's been very effective. But you got to couple it with adding Kane, who is big and he's scored and clearly fits there. He clearly fits in Edmonton. I did the Oilers game in Seattle, Dregs, just right before the New Year. And in talking to Jay Woodcroft, asked him, like, defensively, you guys were so good at the end of last year and not so good right now. And he felt that it was almost like that style is really hard to play. And in September and October and November, they could play it for sort of portions of the season. And his hope was, and what he was seeing was they were starting to get to it on a more consistent basis. And that's when you come back on the puck, like you come back as fast as you go the other way. And it's hard to do. You can say, oh, it's your job, do it all the time. Well, it's hard to do that. Yeah. Physically, your body just doesn't answer the call sometimes. And so he felt they were getting there. It'll be interesting to see now as they get closer to the deadline, what are they going to add to what I think is going to be a pretty good team. Now, it looks like Jack Campbell's, come back to being what Jack Campbell should be. And that's a quality NHL goaltender. Stu Skinner, congratulations to him and his wife as they had their baby. And while he was away, Campbell got a bunch of starts in a row. So now all of a sudden the Oilers have two goalies again. Yeah. And I think they're going to be fine. All of a sudden Calgary's starting to score goals, which, kind of was sort of a surprise that they weren't scoring anything at the start of the year. And so, that leaves Colorado in 9th place.
And they're
Colorado's making the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They're just too good. And all of a sudden they get untracked a little bit. If they get a little scoring from the middle of their and bottom end of their lineup, and they're going to get Byram back quick. They're going to get Manson back quick. Nichushkin played last night. This team's a playoff team, but that's fine to say that. But then somebody's got to come out.
Yeah. And Winnipeg and Dallas aren't coming back to the pack. I mean,
nope.
As we're recording, Winnipeg is the top team in the Western Conference, and Dallas is right there. I mean, there are a number of teams that are in that mix. I'm not, expecting Winnipeg to win the Western Conference, but it's shaping up in the West. It took some time here to get just past the midpoint of the season, but we are seeing some of the storylines from these bigger clubs kind of develop here. So,
one thing I would say, Dregs, to that is there's nowhere to hide in an 82-game schedule. You can have a good first 2 months, and that's awesome, and you're 10 points in front of the pack, and then injuries and lack of depth or whatever it is, and you start sliding back, and you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And so the West is going to be really interesting again this year.
Let's wrap up headlines with one fun one. I mean, you can always have some fun with John Tortorella, but last week decided that and I can understand. How many times do you see the isolation camera in a replay and you see the players on a bench? And the first thing they do is reach back, grab the iPad, the tablet, right? And they want to see what just happened, or more importantly, what didn't happen. Was there a mistake that they made? Whatever. We see it all the time. Well, it obviously annoys Torts because he doesn't think they're focused enough in Philadelphia. So he bans the iPads from the players on the bench. He needs them to stay focused and doesn't give a rat's you-know-what about what the perception is of himself and how we or others respond. How would that go over, do you think, among today's player? because the tablet, the iPads have been around for a handful of years now. They're not new, and players like having that instant and immediate reflection and analysis.
Yeah, okay, so that's fine. So, like a lot of things Torts does, he kills an ant with a sledgehammer, right? Like there's once he takes them off the bench, like, does he really need to say, I don't give a shit what you guys think about the iPads? Like, does he really need to say that? But and there it goes viral again, right? Which, of course, he doesn't care because he goes back to his horse farm and cleans out horse crap for the next day and then goes back and coaches practice. I mean, that's his life, really. Yeah. Rink, farm, rink.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. So I'm between the benches a lot. I'm watching the players. There'll be a shift, Dregs, where nothing happens. Like it's just one of those ping pong shifts. Guys come back, they grab the iPad and they're watching it. I'm like, what the hell could they be watching? Nothing.
Yeah.
Watch the game. There's nothing to watch. And so I do see why coaches think these things become a security blanket and a distraction, because it's not like they're viewing a chance or a mistake all the time. Sometimes they're watching TV.
Yeah.
Well, I heard this great story one time. John Cooper was talking about Pat Maroon, and those two guys have a really good relationship back a lot of years.
Yeah.
So this game was going on, and it was at a point where Maroon wasn't going to play anymore or play very much, down the stretch. Mm-hmm. And Cooper looks over and Maroon's got an iPad. And he's like, what are you doing? He's got the tablet. He's watching something. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, it's kind of occupying time. Like he had nothing to do. He wasn't going to play. He was just watching somebody's shifts. And Cooper said he laughed and he's like, oh, whatever, so, but I do think the players would probably be agitated for about the first day and a half. And then once you don't have it, watch the game. Like you can still talk to the coaches, right? You can still ask.
Yeah.
Where I do think it's very helpful, a goal would go in when I played. We'd go back to the bench and everybody'd be on the bench like, what happened there? And there was this one guy, we used to call him, I got my man. And so the guy would always say, I don't even know how that went in the net. I had my guy in the corner. Oh, you did you? Every time you had your guy in the corner and it was all us idiots. So I think it's really helpful to go, okay, oh man, I should have been over there, or I could have come and helped here, or like that's where it's helpful. But when you just watch your shift, like you're watching TV, there's a game going on in front of you. Watch. Maybe you'll learn something about what's happened on the ice in the moment while you're watching, because you're not doing both. One other thing, you should see those guys handle the iPads. They must have some insurance on those things.
Oh, is that right?
They're not delicately placed back in that little catch-all. The guy's in a hurry and bang, they're slammed around. I'm like, those are pretty durable.
That is an interesting observation. So that's going to be part of my responsibility at some point this season. Who's got the most iPad abuse of any team in the NHL?
I can't imagine. You could probably go through and go, I could see that guy smashing that iPad or that tablet on the floor. Yeah, that would be, I think you could find that.
That's headlines. Thanks again to Boston Pizza.